Since the dawn of time, man has dreamed of combining their best innovations: stick and stone, bow and arrow, flint and steel. Two isotopes to channel the biblical power of the sun. Or Batman and Wolverine, I guess.
I'm getting to that. Next up is polymerization, which I'll use to fuse these two. Now Wildheart, merge with Blade Edge to create...
Yeah, fusing characters together is a fairly easy but nevertheless really exciting form of making cool new characters. Why, yes, I am a Ben 10 fan, how could you tell? I mean, shoot, even the best Yu-Gi-Oh series was based around the fusion mechanic.
Oh, you mean Zexal?
Anyways, one of the coolest fusion series I've ever seen done is easily the Amalgam universe from the crossover series of Marvel and DC comics from around the mid-90s, where the two juggernauts of the industry, Titans too, I guess? Well, they decided to combine their decades-long comic book history to fairly mixed results, if I'm being honest. On one hand, there were some really cool and thematically appropriate fusion characters like Super Soldier, Beastling, and the Aquamariner. However, on the other hand, I mean, like, look at these. Why Iron Man and Green Lantern, of all things? Batman, a brooding but skilled and disciplined detective? Yeah, go ahead and throw him in with the mutant that has the power of going Mega Beast mode whenever McDonald's messes up his Big Mac order. Or, I guess Tim Hortons for his case. The Flash? Ghost Rider? Sure, let's just go ahead and throw in the Demon Etrigan too while we're at it. I was joking! I was joking! Yeah, I'm sure as you can see, I think some of these fusions are kind of nonsensical, to put it politely. So what I decided to do, with all my autistic powers merged together, I wanted to try and find more appropriate fusion constituents for some of the major characters from each universe, with some notable team fusions also thrown in there, and I wanted to kind of add or change little lore bits along the way for some of these characters, mostly Super Soldier, as I'm sure you'll see in his section. Oh, I also had a lot of ideas for some cool villain fusions while we were at it. Man, I had a lot of going on in my mind when I was working on these, looking back at it now. Well, this might as well be a good time as any to go ahead and jump in with our first fusions I really want to focus on, but that being the main trinity of each universe, which surprisingly matched up really well with each other. Anthony Tony Wayne started life as the son of billionaire weapons manufacturer Howard and Maria Wayne, until a fatal car crash incident orchestrated by foreign terrorists killed them both and gravely injured the young Tony. He was then taken captive by the terrorist group League of Ten Rings for ransom, along with physicist Edwin Pennyworth, who saved Tony's life through an experimental application of the Wayne's sonar technology. During their captivity, the two collaborated to make a suit of armor just big enough for the small Tony to wear and take out the terrorists, with Edwin being greatly injured in the process. After returning to America, Tony realizes the harm his family's legacy can cause, and as soon as he can, shuts down the weapons division to focus on medical technology instead, while he leaves to explore the world and learn under various masters of crime fighting and mechanical expertise. Returning again to America, Tony builds a new suit meant to strike fear into the hearts of criminals worldwide and becomes the Iron Bat. Now, I feel like I should try and defend this choice of combination, since I'm sure there are some among you that aren't necessarily convinced that the wisecracking mechanical genius and the dark hard-boiled detective would be a good mix. Firstly, the two are the only unpowered members of their respective trinities, with them both relying on their superhuman intelligence to fight superpowered crime, even on a cosmic level. After that, the superficial similarities are also pretty obvious. Both are heirs to large fortunes and multi-million-dollar companies that they use to fund their crime-fighting efforts. Plus, you even have a lot of parallels with their supporting cast. Both are supported by a butler that are the key assets to both of their identities. Both have representatives of the law that aid them in their crime fighting. And both of them have had a female villain that they've had tenuous romantic attachment with. The Iron Bat also doesn't act alone, despite his demeanor. Namely, in his fight against crime, his new butler and assistant Edwin Pennyworth deals with covering for Tony's public image, while also helping to maintain his equipment from within the Forge Cave. Tony also has more direct support from his sidekick Iron Wings, which is a role that many have taken on in the long history of the Dark Avenger, with many of them moving to become heroes in their own right. On the legal side, Commissioner Rhodes formed a slow but unbreakable bond with Iron Bat as a link to the legal system for Tony to work with. Rhodes himself has occasionally helped by donning an Iron Bat suit of his own, most commonly the heavy Bat Machine armor, which Tony avoids specifically due to its heavy weaponry. In the adventures of the Caped Gladiator, he has encountered and arguably invented many villains that plague him to this day. The man responsible for Tony's origin is the crime lord known as Razal Mandarin, who wields mystical powers and rules the League of Ten Rings Order of Assassins with an iron fist. Razal Mandarin's organization is only one of the many Iron Bat faces in his Armored Crusade, Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, being another major force, especially with their leader, Modor. Modor, or Mental Organism Designed Only for Riddles, was a genius scientist until his mind and body were augmented to function on higher and higher levels of problem solving, losing his mind in the process. Now Modor obsesses over understanding and his own intelligence, mostly seeking to be Iron Bat in battles of wit. A wild card in this battle of organizations and crime rings is Madam Cat, a cat burglar who wears a metal mask and exclusively targets wealthy organizations, both just and unjust. Madam Cat's effect on the Iron Bat has proven to be much more complicated than any of his other foes. A more simple threat is the immensely powerful and intelligent Crimson Bane, a powerful enforcer for the Mexican cartel who manipulates the criminal underground through his wisely chosen associates. The Crimson Bane suit is the physically strongest enemy the Iron Bat has ever faced, having even put the Bat out of commission for a short time. Another parallel to our invincible detective is the terrifying Living Light Show, an ex-psychologist who became obsessed with fear responses and thus created a suit that could turn his body into pure light. This technique is most commonly used to make lifelike holograms of what his targets fear most. While many of these villains prove to be an immense threat to the world at large, the Iron Bat's greatest foe is the maniacal Metal Madness, an enigma whose origin is foggy at best. The most that's ever been confirmed is that the clown craftsman of crime, say that 5 times fast, had some ties to Hammer Industries, where his suit originates from, but other than that, all we know is how much the bad man enjoys chaos of all kinds. Yeah, honestly, the villains were probably the hardest part of this fusion, since a lot of Iron Man villains are really similar. Mostly just guys in other suits with fairly simple goals like money or revenge. While Batman fights way more insane and deranged bad guys than Tony could even imagine. Artistic-wise, this one was fairly interesting to come up with, since I kind of hate it when they put Batman in power suits. Like, I feel like it's really cheap, since that's the easiest thing you could do with a powerless character that's also super rich, when Batman mostly uses realistic or just down-to-earth gadgets. However, putting him with Iron Man lets me bypass those biases completely and make a cool power suit for Batman. Or I mean, Iron Bat. Designing it was pretty fun, but also a bit challenging, since I was trying to make what is effectively just an Iron Man suit, but read like Batman, which I think I've done decently well, with the more jagged details and obviously the cape. I also tried making the final art piece more thematically Batman with the city night setting and the heavy shading, which was really fun to get to try out. But I think that's all I have for our Invincible Crusader, so I feel like we can go ahead and move on to our next character fusion, the Warrior Princess of Olympus and Asgard, Thorana. Thorana of Themyscira was born into a troublesome life as soon as her conception. Her mother, Hippolyta, the queen of Themyscira, having an affair with both Zeus of the Olympians and Odin of the Aesir in the same night. After her pregnancy was revealed, both factions of gods immediately began fighting over who was the rightful father, the resulting war almost tearing apart the realms until Hippolyta proposed a solution. The determining factor would be the child themselves, choosing where they would like to stay when they come of age. This proves to be satisfactory for the scheming gods as they call off the war and begin making favors for their coming daughter. Zeus commissions a lasso made from Aphrodite's magic girdle that forces any caught in it to obey the wielder's command. while Odin charges the dwarves of Nidavellir. I'm trying to stay I'm trying to stay a bit of a narrator for these sections. But these names are going to be driving me up a wall. I apologize ahead of time. This is going to be hard. Nidavellir to create a hammer of the magical Uru metal that would always return when thrown. After being born, Thorana spends her youth exploring her home and learning the ways of battle from the Amazon warriors of Themyscira until one day where she meets a man from the wider realm of Midgar. Steve Foster was an American pilot who crashed on the island of Themyscira and was nursed back to life by Thorana, later offering to take Steve back to America and see the land of mortals for herself. After leaving, she falls in love with humanity and decides to dedicate her life to defend Midgar at all cost, much to the disappointment of the Olympians and the Aesir. Thor and Wonder Woman always seemed like such a perfect mix to me that I was genuinely surprised the original Amalgam comic didn't go for it instead of Storm? Hell, I know the X-Men were huge back then, and I liked the X-Men, but Jesus, these are just completely random at some point. I mean, what do Storm and Diana even have in common? Boobs! And yeah, I know she got like a new look when she picked up Mjolnir in the comic, but that's hardly the same as an actual character fusion. Either way, I think it would be super interesting with the setup that I gave Thorana, with both mythological pantheons having a stake in her story. I mean, this even lets you keep a lot of her villains and supporting cast unfused since they both still exist more or less the same. Many threats from the gods befall Midgard due to Thorana's presence alone. Ares, Circe, and Eris are the most notable enemies from the Olympians, while the Aesir offer Loki, Hela, Malekith, and Surtur to defeat the Thundering Princess. However, Midgard possesses its own villains for Thorana to contest with. The Absorbing Woman started as an underachieving scientist with a lifelong blood disease that had no earthly cure. After pleading to the gods, Loki answered and gave her the ability to absorb any material she touched and grow in size the more she absorbed, with the cost that she always acted as his servant on Midgar. The Silver Gargoyle originated as another scientist who accidentally gave herself the ability to turn anything she touches into silver, and used this to challenge Thorana for the secrets to her immortality. Dr. Radio was another scientist, this time a radiologist for Communist China, before becoming mutated after prolonged exposure and gaining the ability to emit and control radioactive energies, using these powers to attack America on behalf of their home country. Thorana's design was actually pretty easy to come up with since there are a lot of details from the two constituent costumes that work really well together, such as the shared colors and armor details. Also, this version of Mjolnir had some smaller details that I don't think the final art shows off very well, but I'll try and slide in some concept art here and there so you can see what I mean. Honestly, I think this is all I have to add about this fusion since I feel like the overall concept is pretty simple and easy to understand. It's just mostly just Wonder Woman's backstory with some of the themes of like the political power play from Thor stories. Now I want to move on to a slight reimagining of one of the fusions already in the original Amalgam comic line, and one I mentioned I was going to do earlier, Super Soldier. The man who would end the war began life with the name Kal-El on the far-off planet of Krypton, the son of soldiers fighting in the Great Kryptonian Civil War that would eventually claim the planet as a whole. The fearful parents sent their newborn son far, far away in hopes that the world he finds on will be a more peaceful one. Unfortunately, the last soldier of Krypton landed on the outskirts of New York in 1917, where he was found by Brooklyn residents Jonathan and Martha Rogers, who took in this seemingly ordinary baby. As the baby, now named Clark Rogers, ages into pubescence, he gains superhuman abilities tied to his Kryptonian origin. Clark grows much, much stronger and faster than any man and can even fly and emit beams of heat through his eyes, as well as see through walls. Jonathan Rogers, a World War I vet, urges young Clark to hide his powers, knowing how quickly the governments of the world would seek to turn the child into a weapon. However, when Germany rose again to an even greater war, Clark felt the need to use his powers to save the weak who couldn't stand up against the march of the war. Now an adult, Clark joins the military where his immense power gives him a unique position as the Super Soldier, a hero that would stand for the American dream against the evils, whatever flag they stand under. Super Soldier fights valiantly with many allies and enemies alike until one battle with his greatest foe, the Green Skull, which fatally injures the soldier, leading him to rest in the Fortress of Solitude for decades. After finally awakening to an all-new world, Super Soldier continues his fight for the weak all across the world, even if his old ways are challenged by the very government he used to represent. I wouldn't have done this section if I wanted to keep the Amalgam origin as it stands. I really wanted to change it since the origin they gave feels a lot more like Captain America than Superman, so I tried to make it more of a mix while also working on some small changes. I also wanted to include the detail of Kal-El's parents being soldiers, reminiscent of the version of Superman Stan Lee made for the Just Imagine series, where he recreated some of DC's most iconic heroes and events the way he would have done it. I also mostly wanted to redo some of the villain Super Soldier fights, since outside of Green Skull, they're mostly one known character mixed with a literal who. Super Soldier's longest lasting enemy is the Green Skull, or Lex Schmidt, an American business mogul who secretly funds the German research group Hydra, particularly their research on kryptonite, the soldier's greatest weakness. Prolonged exposure has given Lex an extended lifespan and increased strength, but shriveled his skin while dyeing it green in the process. Hydra holds many threats for the soldier, such as the computing genius Brainum Zola, a researcher who's converted himself into a digital being that pilots a robot body. Zola being the one who creates many of the weapons and monsters that Hydra uses for their sinister goals. On the military side, General Zemo is their strongest combatant. Zemo, a fellow Kryptonite who found Earth on his own after the destruction of Krypton and decided to side with Hydra in order to turn Earth into a new home for his kind. Hydra's strongest weapon against Super Soldier is the various Metal Bones robots, which are potentially vast in numbers and all powered by the soldier's greatest weakness, Kryptonite. Outside of Hydra, there is another great threat, one that rivals Super Soldier in all senses of his powers. The monster's agent, known only as Planet Smasher. Planet Smasher is a biological weapon created with the sole goal of destruction, killing and obliterating any planet he comes across in his journey across the universe. Again, I mostly just wanted to change up the backstory for Super Soldier, but there were some smaller aspects of design I also wanted to shake up. Most obviously is the shield, where in the original it was just fully replaced by the House of L crest, which I guess is a shield design, but it feels kind of cheap in comparison. I tried to tie it into the normal rounded cap shield shape to mixed results, as I'm sure you can see here. I also wanted to try and work more Superman into the costume, since the original was just Cap's suit with trunks and the top of his mask cut off. First was the cape, which, Superman has to have a cape. It's just such an important part of his silhouette, especially in big shots of him zooming across city skies. After that, I just wanted to merge the House of L crest with Captain America's star on his chest, since I feel like that makes for a really good visual for this man of two homes. Doubly so when taking into note that he is literally two guys with their own homes. With that, I think we can wrap up this redesign of our Star-Spangled Man of Steel. Now we can go ahead and move on to a fusion I think is a bit more unorthodox, but still super fitting. Jaime Morales was an average kid that no one understands. While a talented student, he always strived to help his family first and foremost. All was normal for him until a field trip to Parker Industries, where a spider enhanced with radiation and nanomachines bit and crawled its way to fuse with Jaime's spinal cord. The spider gives Jaime spectacular abilities similar to those of a spider: increased strength, wall crawling, and a super sense, as well as a versatile suit that can spin webs and extend 4 spider legs out at the user's control. After gaining these strange powers, Jaime is understandably hesitant to pursue a life of crime fighting. That is until the death of Ted Parker, the hero known as Spider-Red. The guilt of knowing he had the power to help and didn't act spurs the young man into donning the title of Spider-Red himself and fighting crime in the stead of his predecessor. While this young hero struggles to stand with his seasoned colleagues, he remains strong in his convictions to carry on the name of Spider-Red, with enough potential to carry him to greater and greater heights. I feel like the reason for mixing Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle and Miles Morales Spider-Man is pretty obvious. Both characters are the successor of a bug-related hero that died tragically against a villain, while also developing their own power sets that deviate their abilities from their predecessors. Honestly, the fusion was so perfect that the hardest part was making their costumes a distinct mixture. I'll put up some of my mock-ups here to show you what I mean. The costumes are so similar that I had to more carefully pick which details to add and take away. In the end, I think the mix came out well, with the armor details and rounded goggles calling back to Blue Beetle, while the color scheme and patterning is more Spider-Man-esque. Oh, I guess I kind of lied about the costume being the hardest part, because, name one Blue Beetle villain. To start with, we should gain a full understanding of Spider-Red's origin, namely the web. The web is a cosmic force that permeates across all through time, space, and beyond, connecting all of those with spider powers to the web. This force was originally created by an ancient arachnid people in the hopes of holding the multiverse together after any major effort to destroy it. This plan unfortunately causes all spider people to be linked, good or evil. This is most evidently shown with Spider Black, a co-worker of young Jaime, who came in contact with a spider similar to the one that powers Spider Red. However, this spider was corrupted after traveling across the web for centuries. This results in Spider Black being much more powerful, while also being more prone to violent outbursts. These defects, mixed with the host's unstable personality, resulted in one of Spider Red's most formidable adversaries, as well as a dark counterpart. For the more earthly antagonists or wall-crawler faces, none rival the reach and influence of Mr. Goblin, a man possessed by a powerful curse. Norman Bones was an affluent businessman and scientist researching genetic and mechanical marvels through his company, Helix Industries. One day this would all change after a genetic experiment altered Norman. Slowly his skin began to turn green and his sweat became poisonous to the touch. However, the worst effect would be to his mental state, with his personality splitting into two, the original Norman Bones and the new, ruthless Mr. Goblin. Norman does his best to run the company by day, but by night, Mr. Goblin takes over to terrorize the city and fight anyone who would pose a threat. Most importantly, Parker Industries, where Spider Red defends his predecessor's legacy. Now, from the skyscrapers of Helix Industries to the streets of common criminals, we find the Mad Mystery Gang, a band of thieves and thugs that utilize magic tricks to pull off their crimes. Originally formed by down-on-his-luck illusionist Quentin Pleater, after he sought to put his mastery over tricks and mysteries to use in the criminal underground, mostly working as a hired goon for other criminal masterminds. Another villain for hire is the brute Carapax the Rhino, a man trapped in a massive robotic suit that turned his misfortune into a career in crime. Alexei Carapax was a poor Russian immigrant desperate for money when he agreed to a paying experiment that would end with his body merged into the robotic suit that he must now rely on for life support. Our last villain is a man charged with the sole goal of taking out our Scarlet Web Slinger, Stengerback. Mac Silver was originally an average human before being experimented on and decked out with cybernetic enhancements designed to hunt down Spider-Red. His enhancements include various poisons, heavy armor plating, and immensely increased strength to match his arachnid target. This fusion came out fairly well for how much thought went into the design and villain mixes, especially considering how fairly simple the other designs were to figure out. While making this part though, I did keep finding myself wanting to go more into the Peter Parker Ted Kord fusion, but I really wanted to keep this simple, and it was already taking me quite a while during the research and writing process, so I feel like with all that, we can go ahead and wrap it up and move on to our next hero, Nova Green. Also our last solo hero of the video. Hal Ryder originated as an average Earthling, attending high school with the dream of becoming a fighter pilot one day, but also hampered by an inferiority complex. That would be his life if not for one fateful day when a passing starship housing the dying Roman Sur sent out his Nova helmet to find a worthy successor to fulfill his mission of protecting the universe. The green helmet would eventually find young Hal, surging his body with the immense power of the green Nova Core, and transforming him into the hero Nova Green. Now as the Jade Rocket, Hal can harness his very own will to fly around at sonic speed, fighting crime while
The prom's tomorrow!
After some time defending Earth, the rookie corpsman is called back to the base world of Oandar for proper training and enrollment. On Oandar, Hal learns the full scope and diversity of the Corps, primarily the different roles filled by each Nova squad, signified by their color. The Green Novas are the standard policing force of the galaxy and the highest in number. The Red Novas act as a metaphorical SWAT branch of the Corps, taking on the most aggressive assignments that require intense pressure. Indigo Novas keep order in the jail worlds of the Corps and focus on rehabilitation for all the inmates through forced penance. Blue Novas help Green Novas as dispatchers or observers in ongoing crimes across the many quadrants of the Enforced universe. Violet Novas work more covertly, either undercover or in espionage, getting as close to targets as possible before making the arrest. The Singular Orange Nova simply works in evidence and records holding, protecting the hoard of information with single-minded focus. Lastly, the Yellow Novas are the secret Black Ops faction of the Corps, taking on the most seedy jobs that the other Novas would object to immediately. To be honest, the aspect of fusing the Nova Corps with the Lantern Corps was the biggest draw-in for me, since I really liked the idea of giving each color their own specialized role to fill. Rich and Hal don't make the most similar characters to mix on a surface level, but I feel like the role their characters fill in their employment is a almost dead ringer for one another. Plus, I really like the Nova's costume, and getting to add the Green Lantern palette scheme to that was a really satisfying concept. For the fused villains, this was far and away the hardest one to pick because both fused counterparts are fairly obscure with not a lot of good adaptations. No good adaptations. Granted, I have read one Nova comic with the Condor, and hey, I made that one in 5th grade. Someone call H-Bomber Soy. We got a plagiarist over here. In the young Nova Green's time on Earth, fighting domestic threats, he faced many powerful rogues, ranging from mad scientists, ancient warlocks, and criminal muscle. The first great threat that Hal faced was the ancient Anath Na-Mut. Currently under the name Hector Sphinx, Hector originates from ancient Egypt, where he aided Pharaoh Ramses II as his court wizard, under which he came upon a meteorite that contained a powerful artifact. This artifact formed as a jewel that embedded itself in Anath Na's forehead, granting him an immense increase of his mental abilities, and even unlocking some psionic powers in the magician. Fearful of his own aid's power, the pharaoh banished the mage from his kingdom, and here Anath Na would wander the world unable to die as his mind expanded painfully every year. He sought death and used many underhanded methods to try and find it, mostly by using his powers to scan the mind of those he finds that have their own power sets, damaging them greatly in the process, if not outright killing them. Another great threat that terrorizes the Emerald Bullet Head is Dr. Solaris, a mad scientist from China who worked for the state in their medical department. Part of his research involved the human brain's latent ability to control magnetic fields, which led him to removing his own brain to experiment on it, eventually placing it into a robotic body with full mastery over magnetism. This proved to be a bridge too far for the government, and Solaris became an enemy of the state and ostracized by his countrymen. After being betrayed so harshly by his homeland, Dr. Solaris seeks to push his enlightenment on the world at large, with Nova Green putting a stop to him many times. Another aspiring crime lord is the common crook Arch Keenan, who gained the ability to transform his body into precious gems and metals after a chemical accident while attempting to steal a chest full of treasure that was exposed to toxic waste. Taking the name Jewel Face, he uses his ability to become indestructible like diamonds and gold to grow his fortune and influence. While a major problem at first, our rocketing knight quickly found ways to easily handle him, turning Jewel Face into a minor nuisance at most. On the cosmic side, the most dangerous threat the entire Corps faces is the Hunter Nova Corps, the original form of the Corps as they were intended by the emotional forces that created the first Nova helmet. The Hunter Novas were made up of violent criminals who were forcibly inducted into the Corps by their first helmets that had a brain-wiping effect on those who wear them. These Novas operated with robotic logic and often didn't take nuanced approaches to crime prevention, jumping straight to lethal force in most situations. After an internal debate with the higher echelon of the Nova Corps, the Hunter Novas were sealed away to never be reawakened until meddling forces released them on every current Nova. Like I said previously, and pretty frequently it seems like, the villains were the hardest part to fuse. Honestly, the villain part of this project has been a major test of my research ability and how much I can tolerate really shitty fandom pages. God, I can almost make a full video just ripping on that fucking shit. Other than that, I did actually get to have a nice opportunity using some first-hand knowledge of minor villains for one of these sections. Now with my ramblings out of the way, we can move on to the next two sections, which are going to focus on teams of heroes and the challenges they face. Starting with the premier hero team of this world, the League of Avengers. The League of Avengers originally formed after an invasion of Earth from the Asgardian Loki and his alien forces. The attack started by using Loki's trademark trickery to distract the many heroes of Earth, alerting them all to a rampage perpetrated by the monstrous hero Titan. This is an amalgam of the Hulk and Shazam. In actuality, Titan was enchanted into anger by Loki, starting the rampage in the first place to distract the heroes Iron Bat, Thorana, Nova Green, and Atomic Ant, which was an original Amalgam universe fusion of the Atom and Ant-Man. After calming Titan down and realizing the trick that had been played on them, the new team unites for the first time to defeat the invaders and capture Loki. With their shared victory, the group decides to form a league of heroes like them to avenge those whose justice hasn't reached yet, now and forever. In the years after, the team would see many new members come and go, such as the speedster Silver Flash, his long-lost twin sister and sorceress White Witch, the Undersea King Namor the Aquaman, the bio-android Vision the Manhunter, the archer Green Eyes, the now-awakened Super Soldier, and many others. While many heroes would come and go from their ranks, villains always came stronger and more devious as a constant. Many of these threats came from the deep reaches of the cosmos, none more prevalent than the dangerous Thanocide, a mad god from the planet of Titacalypse. Thanocide seeks nothing more than to conquer and destroy as much of the universe as he can with the various powers he's acquired, such as the Cosmic Box and the Anti-Life Gems. There have also been teams formed in direct mockery of the League, the first and foremost being the Masters of Doom. The Masters of Doom originally formed in response to the effectiveness of the Mighty League, forming themselves around the greatest foes of each Avenger. Originally, the team consisted of the founder Green Skull, the foil Metal Madness, the Yellow Nova Sinitus, the radioactive Dr. Radio, and the ancient Black Titan. But the change in membership is near constant, with the lack of core cohesion outside of Green Skull's funding. Regardless of the composition, this team would rise again and again as a constant thorn in the side of heroes worldwide. A villain that came from within the ranks of the League is the copy robot Amazatron, a joint creation of Iron Bat and Atomic Ant as a countermeasure if any of the League members went bad and couldn't be stopped by the rest of them. Its programming and mental mapping would drive it to having a lot of the same mental issues as its creators, driving it to madness in isolation and growing hateful of the heroes it was designed to battle. Now with its own will, Amazatron is a recurring threat to the team through its many iterations after every defeat. One of the men who stand against the League repeatedly is the immortal time traveler Vandal the Conqueror. Vandal is a universal constant, originally a caveman that gained the powers of immortality and peak physical form from a meteorite, and eventually by the 30th century had gained the technology to freely travel through time and had become the absolute conqueror of his era. Hence the title. Vandal now travels across time, inciting events with the help of his present self to ensure his rule and erase any challengers before they can stand against him. However, his paradoxical plans are often thwarted by the League through matching his own wit and preying on his superiority complex. The last being our Amalgam Avengers stand against is more of a cosmic force that can only be deterred for a short time. Starro the Devourer. Starro started as an average starfish-like alien before being chosen by mysterious cosmic forces to act as a new universal balancer. Designed to roam the universe, devouring worlds it comes across. Starro doesn't take pleasure in its duty, but it fulfills it regardless, often employing heralds infused with a fraction of its own power to find worlds to eat. League of Avengers was a pretty fun one to put together since I got to throw in a bunch of other character fusion ideas that I didn't really think would be enough for their own section of the video. The final group shot showed a lot of their how their powers work, but I'm also going to try and splash in some concept art I made for these guys just to kind of get you a better look at them. Villains were also a ton of fun since it was pretty much just mashing the most powerful baddies together. There was also a lot of convenient parallels between the major villains each of them faces that I'm sure you noticed as I described them. And while I could go on talking about other character fusions that would make sense for the team, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the video with our next team fusion, X-Patrol. In the Amalgam world, superpowered people are fairly common. However, most of these come from natural skills, enhanced tech, or some altered biology. There are also those born with supernatural abilities, known as metamutants. These people are often oppressed in society out of fear for their strange and destructive powers. One of these metamutants, Professor Charles Calder, has decided to use his psychic abilities to track down outcast metamutants and employ them for his metamutant team, the X-Patrol. Over the years, the team would grow and divide many times as members come and go, but for now we'll just focus on the core original team. The X-Patrol's original combat leader is the reluctant Negative Eyes, a former high school star athlete who lost his future after manifesting his mutation. Negative Eyes has the ability of his eyeballs being portals to an alien planet of pure energy that constantly blast outward as a beam of concussive force. After meeting Professor Calder, he would get bandages and glasses that could help contain his alien energy, allowing the young man to live an almost normal life. Negative Eyes often fawns over his teammate, Mento Woman, an immensely powerful psychic that requires the special Cerebro helmet to safely use her powers. Mento Woman was Professor Calder's first student after she awakened her powers early on in childhood, and her immensely wealthy family sought out Calder as a specialist for her case. He would teach the young girl how to contain her powers better before building the Cerebro helmet for them both, as it siphons off a small amount of Mento's power and allows Calder to access them later on himself. The next member of the team is also one who suffers the most from his mutation. Cold Steel started out as an adventurous young man who would take on stunts all across his hometown until his ice powers manifested while fighting and nearly killing a bully. This event would draw the violent ire of his town, and he suffered major injuries from a car crash while attempting to flee. His ice powers also prevented his body from healing properly, and now he's forced to live from within a robotic suit that keeps him alive and circulates air and controls his body temperature. This metal prison causes him much dismay, much like the next teammate's metamutation does. Elastic Angel was born to superstar parents and was quickly ushered into the same life of glitz and glamour, which would cause much grief as the youth's powers evolved. Slowly but surely, the young star grew out fleshy wings from his back, wings that he could control to make bigger or smaller to a degree, and later on could even change their shape to simple forms. As his wings became wider and hard to hide, Angel would retreat from the limelight, causing prowling questions from the press until he was approached by Professor Calder to join his new team of heroes and use his powers for good. The last member of the team is Beastling, a character that was already in the original X-Patrol, so I don't really feel much need to change, so just look him up if you want to know more. I want to focus this team more on the original X-Men team, since the Amalgam Comics X-Patrol book was a fusion including X-Force for some reason. I can only assume it was more popular at the time since Cable, I guess? I don't really know. I guess Starfire was also on the Doom Patrol, but I'm not gonna complain because... anyways, it was pretty difficult picking the fusion constituents because power-wise, there aren't a lot of similarities between the two, outside of both having a psychic and a guy who uses energy beams. Either way, now I want to talk about the final villains of the video with the strange fusions I had to resort to with the bizarre baddies that the Doom Patrol's Rogues Gallery is made of. The main antithesis to the Doom Patrol is another rotating team of Metamutants, but this one nefariously evil. The Brotherhood of Evil Metamutants, led by the dastardly Magno Brain. Magno started life as a Jewish scientist in World War II, also a metamutant with magnetic abilities he kept secret from others, already in fear of being targeted for his human heritage, let alone his metamutant powers. Unfortunately, he was taken and suffered great injury during his internment, which he used his powers to save his brain in a medical tank. Later on, he would become a metamutant supremacist and use his powers to bring others into his ranks against humanity. Magno Brain's greatest ally is the metamutant ape, Mademoiselle Mystique, who was equally tortured for her powers to shapeshift into anyone she's seen. While working with Magno, she grows a romantic bond and remains his most steadfast supporter. Another frequent member is the immortal General Shaw, one of the first metamutants in human history with the ability to absorb life force energy from anyone he touches. Across the centuries, he's formed many organizations for his benefit and regularly draws on influence for his villainous schemes. A foe that fights out of a more personal hatred for the patrol is the dangerous twin sister of Professor Calder, Madame Nova. Nova originally was the average twin sister of Charles Calder, only her metamutant ability being a powerful split personality that was merely diagnosed as average mental illness. The Madam would rot in various mental wards for most of her life until being broken out by Magneto Brain after learning of her heritage as his mortal foe's own sibling. Magno would perform a surgery that would awaken Nova's true ability, an even greater level of telepathy than Calder has ever been capable of. She would use his mind-bending power to take revenge on her brother for as long as her hatred burned. The last enemy of the X-Patrol is easily the strangest foe of the entire universe. The alien conqueror, Mojuax. Mojuax is a fairly weak being on his own, but his influence is immense and universe-wide from his majorly successful series of various broadcasts. First and foremost, his game shows with the fate of planets on the line. He first encountered the X-Patrol after kidnapping them from Earth and forcing them to play life-threatening games for the sake of their home and his ratings. Ultimately, the Patrol escaped and saved their world, much to the enthusiasm of Mojuax, due to the massive boost in viewership he got from it. From this point on, he marked the X-Patrol as his golden goose to save his show whenever his ratings started to dip. And that's all I have for the X-Patrol and their villains. Honestly, their villains matched up pretty well, even if there were some weird mixes in there. Either on the thematic or power set level, I found some pretty fun parallels that I hope you found comedically clever at the very least. The final art also came out super colorful, which I didn't really predict going into it. And before wrapping all this up, I just want to go on a bit of a tangent to say that the Doom Patrol was far and away the strangest aspect I had to do research for. They're easily the one part of this video I know the absolute least about, and while researching, I came up with a lot of cool older art for the team, and that Grant Morrison had to run this series in the 90s. Grant Morrison, if you don't know, wrote one of the best comics I've ever read, Skrull Kill Crew. So I will definitely be checking out this run at some point or the other. And here at the end, finally, I just want to mention some honorable mentions and plug some of my socials so you can check out the art from here and some of the concept art I worked on. I had two main ideas that I couldn't find anywhere to mention. First being Sergeant Nick Waller as a mix of Sergeant Fury and Amanda Waller as a great combination of a government agent with shady tactics. The second being a fusion of the Teen Titans and the Runaways, which would consist of the characters mixed together. I mostly didn't cover the Teen Runaways since a third team would add like 3 more days to the video length, and it would just be a ton of extra art to do. I also know even less about the Runaways since I've never even seen an adaptation of them, so I figured I'd just leave it be for now. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the many designs I presented here to you. And if you liked any of the art shown here, feel free to check out my Twitter Newgrounds from the links below. Also, if you want to see any more of these art kind of videos like this on the channel, check out some of these other videos I did in a similar style. I'll have annotations or whatever around here somewhere. Also, if you want to see any more videos in this kind of style, make sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. This mostly just lets me know that you liked it, and it helps boost the algorithm, because I think that's still how it works. And with all this finalized, I think I'll be heading out for now, and I hope you look forward to whatever I have next. And feel free to let me know whatever you want to see me do in this kind of style in the future, if you want. Other than that, I think I'm ready to wrap it up. So, yeah, see ya.